What's up guys? Welcome to another episode of Witching with Graphs, where we create and interpret graphs of different data. This episode is brought to you by Gleniano Cortez, Maria Hannah Ava J. De Leon, Alessandro May T. Lau, and Amanuddin S. Sharief from the section 2UMT. We hope that you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching. In this week's episode, we are given a set of data regarding 399 patients that had been admitted to a hospital because of dengue-related symptoms and complications and other diagnoses and acute viral illness. Through the use of RapidMiner, the data was cleaned and the improperly formatted data was removed and modified, resulting in a final number of 104 patients. Also using RapidMiner, the following 5 graphs have been created, and in this video we will interpret each and every one of them. These graphs denote the variables regarding the state of the patients upon admission and discharge from the hospital. Dengue is one of the arboviruses transmitted by mosquitoes of the genus Aedes in a human-mosquito-human cycle. It is endemic in more than 120 countries, where 50 to 100 million infections occur each year. Therefore, dengue has the greatest impact on public health worldwide, with high morbidity rate but low mortality rate, according to WHO. Now let's move on to the graphs. For the first graph, this bar graph is entitled Comparison of WBC Count Among Patients. It compares the average WBC count between patients with different diagnoses upon admission. Therefore, it uses 2 variables: the severity of dengue or the diagnosis upon admission of the patient, and the patient's average WBC count. The graph shows that patients diagnosed with severe dengue have higher WBC count than patients diagnosed with dengue but without warning signs. Other data includes patients diagnosed with acute viral illness who has the least WBC count, while patients diagnosed with other illnesses, not specified in the data, have the greatest WBC count. According to Qatariyya 2018, dengue can result in a drop in WBC and platelet counts. In addition, a study by Lacal and Ali 2018 also cited previous studies showing the reduction in WBC count as a common occurrence during dengue fever. The findings in a study conducted by Chalawem Wong 2018 also supports this relationship, when the white blood cell count in the dengue group was found to be significantly lower than the white blood cell count of the control group. These findings have a significant impact on the field of medical technology, since analyzing body fluids and specimens is the primary job of a medical technologist. By determining the WBC count and measuring the other components of the blood, one will be able to determine if there is an abnormality, illness, or disease, for blood is one of the bases or parameters to determine a person's health. According to Null, there are different types of white blood cells, and the increase or decrease in the count of different types of white blood cells indicate different medical conditions. Now let's move on to the second graph. This scatter plot is entitled Relationship between ICU days and platelet count. It shows the relationship between the amount of time a patient spends in the ICU and their platelet count. Therefore, the variables used are the number of ICU days and the patient's platelet count. As can be seen in the graph, patients with a high platelet count spend less time in the ICU, while patients with a low platelet count spend more time in the ICU, thus presenting an inversely proportional relationship between the 2 variables. According to Lacal and Ali 2018, apart from WBC count, the decrease in platelet count is also a common feature during dengue fever. Also cited in their study, platelet count is stated as a predictive measure and recovery parameter of dengue. The implication of platelet count has a significant impact on the field of medical technology, since it can also predict certain diseases or disorders present in a patient. One of these is dengue, which is common in the Philippines. Patients with dengue commonly have a low platelet count as well. On to the third graph. This bar graph is entitled Comparison between the average platelet counts of patients with and without rashes. It shows the comparison between the average platelet count of patients with and without rashes. Therefore, it uses 2 variables: the average platelet count of the patients and the absence or presence of rashes among patients. Based on the graph, a high platelet count is associated with patients who do not exhibit rashes after having been diagnosed with dengue fever, while a low platelet count is present to those patients who have rashes. According to Mishra, George, and Abhilash 2018, the presence of rashes is common in patients with dengue fever, and that it can vary from erythematous rash to morbilliform rash. In addition, presence of skin rash in the early onset of sudden elevation in body temperature can assist with making the diagnosis of dengue fever. Adult patients with skin rash can develop worsening thrombocytopenia, which is a condition where you have low platelet count. The role of medical technologists is to provide quick, timely, and useful medical information for the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of diseases. One of their primary jobs is to collect body fluids such as blood, urine, and sputum. Platelets are found in the blood, and it keeps us from bleeding too much. It is one of the parameters to determine a person's health. On to the fourth graph. This pie chart is entitled Preference of Patients Between Private and Clinical Institutions. It shows the patient's preference in which health institution to seek medical services from, in which the patient has two options, private or clinical. Out of a total of 104 patients, 67% or 70 patients admitted themselves to the private institutions, while 33% or 34 patients admitted themselves to the clinical. This shows that more than half of the patients prefer private institutions. According to a study by Al-Balushi and Khan 2017, the cost of services incurred makes an impact in three factors: the patient's selection of hospital for medical treatment, the attitude of the reception staff and doctors toward the patient, and modern equipment. These three factors affect the reason as to why people prefer private institution when getting medical treatment. In another study by Tang et al. 2016, it is said that socioeconomic background of patients significantly relates to their preference in healthcare institutions. Medical technologists mainly work in clinical laboratories or hospital-based laboratories. It is important for medical technologists to know which facility patients prefer in order for them to determine which facility is best for them to work at. On to the last graph. This pie chart is entitled The Disposition of the Total Number of Patients Upon Discharge. It shows the total number of patients upon discharge in which there were only two possible conditions: improved, if the patient improved and was discharged from the hospital, or died if the patient died from the disease. According to the graph, out of the 104 patients admitted to private and clinical institutions, 96.2% or 100 patients had an improved condition upon discharge, and 3.8% or 4 patients had died. The graph shows that the great majority of the patients recovered from their initial diagnosis. According to Naeem et al. 2018, it can be inferred that dengue fever can be a very fearsome disease when immediate actions are not performed immediately. Furthermore, recovery from infection is believed to provide lifelong immunity against the serotype, or at least partial or temporary in other cases. Medical technologists are the reason why doctors can give a correct diagnosis. They are the ones who conduct tests to pinpoint what is the cause of the disease, making it easier for the doctors to give proper treatment. Because of the role of medical technologists in healthcare, patients have a more chance of surviving diseases like dengue fever. Therefore, the medical technologist's job is critical in improving the patient's condition. And that is it. We're done. So if you want to check out the research studies mentioned in this video, here they are now. Just pause the video so you can get the title and the name of the journals. Thank you guys for watching this week's episode, and of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below so you can be notified of any of our new uploads. Have a great day and see you in the next episode of Switching with Graphs.